Hi, welcome to the next session of our course. So I was talking about Kanban. I got really excited because I see this practice quite often now uh, in the software world. As as someone who has a PhD in computer science, I am working in academy, but I'm also following many practices I'm very excited and follows practices followed in the industry. And I think knowing these practices such as Kanban and Scrum and others, particularly the agile ones, will benefit you quite a lot, especially if when you go to a company that uses them, because having some knowledge about these, some of the tools that they use and the practices as well, it will help you a lot to fit in. If you don't know anything about how a Kanban board works, or what is a sprint cycle, or what you need to do in a product backlog in order to pass into the development and then be done with the products be done with the task in the sprint cycles. These will obviously put you into a difficult position, even if you have the skills to fit into that job, because they have to teach you all of this stuff. You're not going to only learn a new kind of framework there or programming or whatsoever, but you have to also adapt to the how the company works. And I think this is a very good way. This course is a good place to practice those things, such as use of the Kanban board or Scrum and other methodologies that are followed in agile development. This is why I'm going to give you your first assignment next week, which you will need to use agile tools to develop a simple product. I'm going to also keep listing what you need to develop, and you're going to pick up as pairs which ones you want to develop and use specific tools to develop basically apply one of these models or even a combination of them, so that I'll see how well you work with others, and I'll see your reflection as well. So as I told you, Kanban board is a very good practice, not only applied in the Kanban methodology, but also in Scrum. You can apply a Kanban board. This is very weird. A lot of students do not understand this. Like, okay, these were supposed to be like different methodologies. Then why are we using a Kanban board in Scrum? Like I said, in reality, yes, they are different, but in practice, what the companies do is that they kind of like combine these things and see which one works for them. Okay, it's not a rival, or they are not opposite to one another, but you can use them in kind of like the ways to complement one another, to complete each other, and see how it works within your company, especially if you are working with chaotic people that they have to deal with 10 things at a time in an environment, especially for developers nowadays, that our role is not only sitting down and programming and terminal machine anymore. We have many different roles, and if we have tasks already in progress that we are responsible, this kind of Kanban board can prevent us getting more tasks. People can see, such as your management can see, that you're already busy with 3 tasks, and before dumping you with more tasks, they will actually look at the Kanban board that you prepare and say that, okay, now Ahmed, for example, is working on the 3 tasks that is from the board that was given to him this week, so I'm not going to give this job to him. Going to give it to, let's say, Fatih, who has less progress, less task in the Kanban board. So every person kind of like has this. So, and they can also generate Kanban cards, which other people can see. And it helps the managers as well to see who is busy with what task and how the progress is ongoing. This is a very good practice of for the management to see how people are organizing themselves, what tasks they are working on, and essentially these tasks should be completed in 1 or 2 week time. There is a very nice video on YouTube that I found, and I want to show it to you, that kind of like mentions the difference between Scrum and Kanban and also shows some of the similarities. So I'm going to go and start the video. If you found this, so I'm going to make it like my share screen should fit into the size of the video so we can watch it. Can you all see? Yes? Yeah, good. I'm gonna start the video now. Let's watch it together. Video, the chances are you've just done a search for the difference between Scrum and Kanban. Well, you've come to the right place. Not only do I have a great video for you, I also have a cheat sheet for you to download. Hi, this is Gary. Welcome to Development That Pays. We've got a ton of stuff to get through today, so let's get straight at it. Scrum and Kanban are the best known of a whole range of agile software development methodologies. Let's break that down. Software development, in very broad terms, looks like this. The product owner decides what to build. The development team builds it. And customers use it, experience it, benefit from it in some way. What makes software development agile is that value is delivered to the customer in small increments. And importantly, feedback is gathered from the customers and fed back into the process. It's the product owner's job to take input from customers and from other stakeholders and to organize it into a prioritized list of features and user stories. This list is known as the product backlog. Now, what happens between the product backlog and the customer is what distinguishes Scrum from Kanban. As we'll see, each has its own routines and rituals, and it's this person's job to help the product owner and the development team to adopt and maintain good habits. In Scrum, the role is known as the Scrum Master. In Kanban, the role is known as the Agile Coach. Something that Scrum and Kanban have in common is that both are pull systems. Without getting into too much detail, the pull system ensures that work gets from product backlog to customer in the shortest possible time. The pull system also helps to uncover bottlenecks in the process, which helps to ensure that work gets from product backlog to the customer in the shortest possible time. As you'll see in a moment, Scrum and Kanban implement the pull system in two strikingly different ways. Scrum teams work in a series of sprints, most commonly 2 weeks in duration. Each sprint is preceded by a sprint planning meeting run by the Scrum Master and attended by the product owner and the development team. Together, they select high priority items from the product backlog that the development team believe it can commit to delivering in a single sprint. This is the pull I was talking about earlier. The selected items are known as the sprint backlog. For the next 2 weeks, the development team focuses on working through the items in the sprint backlog and only those items in the sprint backlog. In all but the most exceptional circumstances, any new requirements that crop up have to wait for the next sprint. It's common practice for Scrum teams to use a board to track the progress of work. It's called a Scrum board or an Agile board, or even, slightly confusingly, Kanban board. Each day during the sprint, there's a Scrum meeting. It's a standard meeting where the team takes a maximum of 15 minutes to discuss progress and to identify any blockers. At the end of the sprint, the work completed during the sprint is packaged for release. Any incomplete items are returned to the product backlog. The sprint ends with 2 rituals. The sprint review, which is a demonstration of new functionality to the stakeholders, and the sprint retrospective, which is an examination of what went well, what went badly, what could be improved. The aim of the retrospective is to ensure that the next sprint is more efficient and effective than the last. And that's Scrum. Kanban does a few things differently. There's no 2-week sprint. Kanban is a continuous process. And of course, there's no sprint backlog. The pull system in Kanban happens in a different way, via work in progress limits. Each column on the Kanban board has a work in progress limit related to the team's capacity. For example, a team with 2 developers would set a limit between 2 and 4 items. The lower, the better.
Let's see the pull system in action. When testing of a particular feature is complete, the corresponding ticket moves to the done column. The empty column is a signal to the previous column to send another ticket. That's the pull. Similarly, when the build column is almost empty, it's a signal to the dev team to select another high priority item from the backlog. That's the pull again. Kanban has a number of rituals in common with Scrum, although the naming is slightly different. Daily stand-up meetings, demos for stakeholders, and retrospectives. So now you know the difference between Scrum and Kanban. Two important things to say at this point. First thing, neither Scrum nor Kanban are as prescriptive as I may have made them appear. High-performing teams discover what works for them and flex the system accordingly. Secondly, I've put together a cheat sheet for you that covers everything that we've talked about today, plus some additional notes that I think you will find useful.
Right. I think that video was very self-descriptive, like it actually emphasized the difference between Scrum and Kanban. So basically both are trying to achieve the same outcome. It's just the way that they apply it is different. So Scrum is more related to our own field, I would say. You will see probably Kanban in other disciplines as well. But as I tell, these are not rivals to each other. They are like complementary to each other. So it is possible in a Scrum model, someone uses a Kanban board because Kanban boards are very popular and really liked in companies to manage the progress. And even if you go to an industry or a company that has management problems, let's say, you can even suggest these practices to them. And hence, this is another reason I think why you are taking this course. By learning these practices, maybe your bosses and it's going to be the management will be some old people. They don't know these new practices being followed in the software industry. And you can actually introduce them a Kanban board of how they can manage and follow up the progress of people, because it might be very difficult for them to see the progress, especially if they are trying to work on work in progress task for a long time. So before I jump into the next chapter, the next topic, I would say distributed Scrum. Do you have any questions about Kanban or lean software development? No. Wow. Lately you are very, very quiet. Like you should destroy me with questions when you come to these sessions, and you're not even trying. Like last year when I was giving this lecture, a lot of people approach me and ask me questions, and I'm a bit disappointed that you are not that active. Please look up these terminologies, do your research very well, and approach me to get into a discussion-based approach, because as I told you many times, I don't want you to look at the roof and tell me, oh, these are the advantages of Scrum. Oh, this is Kanban. This is this is that. I'm not going to ask you what is Kanban or what is Scrum, but I would rather give you the chance, let's say, or assess you to explain me how these things can be applied, okay, in certain situations, and what are their differences and what tools you can use. So I think these are the things that you should look into. And that is why I want to give you an assignment about this next week. Now, we all discussed previously that all these methodologies that we introduce in Agile assumes that you work closely, mostly in co-located teams, which means those people actually daily interact with one another, mostly physically, and they can be in the same environment to talk to one another, okay? However, situations like this, such as the situation we are in right now, or different located teams in different parts of the world, it is not possible for them to meet daily for 15 minutes on a daily meeting to discuss their product backlog, the work in progress, and how these tasks can pass, how the system pull will happen, stuff like this. It might be very difficult for them to discuss. So what they do here is that by changing some of the perspectives of in the Scrum and Agile development, they come up with a solution called distributed Scrum. And this idea is to apply the Scrum to more than middle-sized uh, organization or companies, but also to the workplaces that cannot meet on a daily basis. For example, in the project that I'm going to give you next week, you can apply a distributed Scrum model because you cannot meet with your team, and you will be able to use, you should be able to use some tools to communicate with one another. Distributed Scrum resulted several agile development tools to emerge for our industry. And some of these are, for example, GitHub. GitHub was discovered as a repository tool for as a version control system to keep the versions of our system. But from there, because of these practices being applied in the software world, the way that we look at GitHub now is so much different than when it was emerged the first time. It was uh, it was the idea to develop a cloud-based system where people can take the version all their system that are developed, and at its core GitHub still doing the same thing, but it is doing much more than that. You can actually post a specific thing on GitHub and see the progress of other people, which can be combined with distributed Scrum. You can keep a wiki, such as like what you do in the Kanban cards. You can keep a history of records for every single version that you're going to come up with. You can even see who has done what change in the program. So all these methodologies, approaches also change the way that we see how the software industry is evolving, and also cause new tools to be emerged specifically to support software developers. Let's read some of the features of distributed Scrum together. In distributed Scrum, Scrum Master should be located with the development team so that he or she is aware of everyday problems. Now, this is not 100% true. What happens here is that the Scrum Master, yes, it is located to a close distance with the team, and he or she is responsible to track down the everyday problems or tasks, but the main purpose here is to meet with the team. So if I am meeting with you guys every day, it doesn't matter in the distributed Scrum if I'm meeting you with a video conference on a specific tool or on other platforms, as long as that communication is supplied. But at its core, when the distributed Scrum emerged, it was the idea that the team manager, the Scrum Master, should be close to the team. Next, the product owner should visit the developers and try to establish a good relationship with them. It is essential that they trust each other. I again agree with this part, but this doesn't need to be a physical visit nowadays, because this visit could be again something that you can do, like a synchronous meeting on a specific platform. And usually the product owner's first video conference uh, with the team alongside with the Scrum Master. So it's not like they kind of like do something like behind the scenes with the Scrum Master, but every time that they meet, Scrum Master is there as well as the team. So real-time communication between the team members particularly happens through instant video messages, or just keeping everyone in the loop through specific tools. So the team focuses again on the Scrum development, but these are co-located teams now, and they work a portion of a bigger project, and each one focuses on their end rather than keeping the project as one big project. You divide the project into different sprint cycles now, and try to align each sprint that goes on at the same time, so that the project and the version at the end will come as a whole. So continuous iteration, the team members being aware of the state of each sprint is an important part of distributed Scrum. So basically what happens here is that you essentially follow the same steps. So the sprints are still in between 2 to 4 cycles. There's still pull systems, there's still product log, there's still getting into those selection planning steps, and then the software is still released within those sprint cycles after being completed. But most of the communication nowadays with the distributed Scrum run through the internet. So as an example, you can look into how I run the lecture now. You cannot go to the class, and obviously I cannot see you. So what we do is we change our approach, but technically the activities and the roles we have are the same. It's just that the approach we follow is different. Instead of being in a class and you seeing me, or having physical or body language contact, what we do here is that we express our ideas, emotions through talking to one another in a video conference. And I can also write anything on my slides using these tools, specific tools developed for me to lecture, so that you can follow the lecture itself. Does it clear out? Another idea behind distributed Scrum was to apply this to bigger projects, so that bigger projects can also follow agile methodologies. So what they do in here is that the parts of the project are divided into more than one sprint cycles. So instead of you are doing one sprint, you do many sprints, but they are all synchronous. Such as a specific team in England works on the user interface. At the same time, another sprint is going in Canada working in the persistency part to get some JSON data from the users. But at the end of the day, when those sprints are completed, they will be combined and the product will be released for the next version. So this is called distributed Scrum. And when you apply any agile methodology to a big project, this is called scaling agile methods. So essentially, agile methods have been proven to be very successful for small and medium-sized projects, but they are not particularly developed, and it's not aimed for big projects. So after their success, after seeing how these projects, how these methodologies work very good for people that are in the software industry, and the people feel valued, they can work in smaller tasks and actually feel the sense of achievement, and the version comes along, the big companies try to adopt these methodologies after seeing how successful they are into their own agenda. And once you change that and apply it to a big projects with modifications, this is called scaling up the agile method. So you scale up it to fit into the needs of the big industry. But there are certain things that you cannot change, even when you scale up an agile methodology, such as all big companies in the world, they have CEOs, the central authority that is responsible for managing that company as well as the processes. So those features cannot be changed because big projects require a solid hierarchy so that there is an authority. Otherwise, things can get really chaotic. When teams have problems or management has some problems with the teams or other people like stakeholders, they might not know where to go and address. Some of the decisions needs to be taken by a higher authority. So CEOs is not always viable. Something Getting rid of CEOs is not a viable solution in big companies. There must be an authority. So they cannot get rid of this hierarchy because this is their business model. So what they do is that they scale up the agile methods, they use some of the practices, particularly for development, but they still keep their business model, such as they can apply practices in XP and Scrum, but it runs through the team members and they still keep their rights. They are not called Scrum Masters, they are called team leaders or something else. They still do the Scrum mastering task, but instead, they still protect their identity, their work title as the team leader, as the authority, and so forth. So it's not like 100% they use these practices, but rather take up the ones that they see flexible to their company's need. Some of the practical problems with agile methodologies, particularly when it goes to a global scale, are copyright and informal documentation. Now, it is not always easy to skip the documentation, particularly when we scale up the agile methodologies, because this is how people are tracked down. This is how the versions are tracked down. And more importantly, the global businesses are probably they have to protect their identity because they are rich and they are working on a global state. Anyone with any small mistake will try to rob them. So they need to protect and take their legal actions with probably with 20 lawyers at their side to make sure that they follow a legal approach when they release a software so that it will not go into a breach in somewhere or someone will not sue them for some copyright violation. So documentation is still an important part of big companies, and this might actually create some problems if they follow 100% agile approach. Focusing on the development and maintenance is another problem. Agile methods are most appropriate for new software development rather than software maintenance. Where big companies out there, they try to release a software and they want to maintain it because they spend a lot of time and energy to develop that software. And now what they do is they want to maintain that software to be used continuously by the users. Such as today, we don't have Facebook 2. Ever since Windows 10 was introduced 5 years ago, there is no new Windows. It's been already 5 years. It's gonna be 6 years next year, and Microsoft, as far as I know, hasn't released any new version. So what big companies do is that they don't want to release software as often as before, but rather once they have released it, they want to maintain it. And in those kind of circumstances, it could be a little bit difficult, particularly for big projects, to keep those sprint cycles to focus on the agile development. Majority of software costs in large companies a lot of money, and they earn basically money by maintaining their existing software. And as I said, many times over, agile methods are designed for small co-located teams rather than people, hundreds of or 1,000 people working in some project at the same time. This is why it is an active research area. I will say that how we can apply agile uh, methods to large projects. Large systems usually are collections of separate communicating systems. Okay, and it's not always easy, not always suitable to be applied for agile frameworks. Large systems requirements are concerned with interaction and might not have room for flexibility or incremental development. They need sometimes they need to be plan driven. So that is why they take some of the portions of from agile, but they still keep the plan driven development. Several systems are integrated in large systems to create a big system. A significant fraction of the development is concerned with system configuration rather than the original code development. So basically, you focus on improving the system more and more rather than focusing on the original development. So maintenance is the issue here, hence why it costs them more money to develop a software from scratch. Another important point is that large systems usually have diverse set of stakeholders. There isn't always one guy supporting it, but rather like Facebook, like if you, for example, work with Facebook, you can actually buy a certain stock market value of it, let's say 0.5 percentage, even if you are a Facebook worker. And that is actually their marketing strategy. As Facebook earns money, your salary also increases because the market value of the company increases. This is why many of the big companies sell their stock market values to their own employees so that they will be motivated to work more, and as they work more and the company succeeds, they also earn more money. This is a practice being applied by Facebook, by big companies out there, and and they keep this strategy. They sell some portion of their company to motivate their own workers, their own employees. And when a company is owned by several people, it can be very difficult to apply these kind of strategies because obviously they will disagree with one another. Other popular approaches that we're going to follow up through agile development are Crystal and dynamic software development methods. Now, Crystal is the one that you apply in many different projects. You will see this, you probably applied this, but you didn't know its name. It's a human powered, adaptive, light collective agile method. What it does is it's ultra light because it doesn't advocate documentation, overhead management, or reporting. Instead, it believes that keeping things light and very focused on development. For example, when you develop a Java project, you never did actually a proper flow chart or any kind of documentation regarding design or even development. You never did anything that will make us track down your progress unless you are specifically asked to. You didn't even sit down probably to draw a diagram of how the program would look like at the end. You just sit down there and try to develop the software. This is called Crystal, and it is okay for suitable for small projects. They usually have four roles here where the project sponsor, the stakeholders, in this case, the sponsor is me giving you the project, the senior designer and or programmer, they could have the same role. This is you, and business class designer who are basically testing the system. Finally, there is the role of the user who uses the system as well. For example, when I give you a programming project, you could be the senior designer programmer and also the business class designer who is going to test the system. And I could be the project sponsor giving you the project and also the user who's going to use it. There are some advantages of this, of course. Multiple disciplines and roles are given to one person so they can develop the system as fast as possible without arguing with other people or arguing how the system would look like, and it works very well for small development. However, there are also big disadvantages. Because no documentation is done, management is not always traceable. such as you bring me a program, but I never saw you developing it. So I ask you questions to understand whether or not you actually develop the software or ask someone else to do your job. Communication only flows within the team. Individual from outside the team cannot easily follow what's going on. No actual distinction between planning and development, and these heavily depend on the requirement of the project. So basically, your approach that when you follow up to develop your assignments can be counted under the umbrella of Crystal. Some of the features are that encourage in this kind of model is face-to-face communication, forms being really small, such as 2 to 20 people, and focusing on the problem rather than documentation. So majority of the project management runs through the development, and there is no documentation at all or very little. Now today I'm gonna stop at Crystal, and I'm not gonna do any more lecture. In the next lecture, I'm gonna start with the STM and hopefully complete this chapter. Now, before I stop for today, do you have any questions to ask? Any questions? No. Okay, please write in English. Thank you for coming to my class then. I'll see you guys in the next week. And I will also prepare the assignment that I'm going to give you next week, and we'll discuss it via online session that I will hold next week. I really appreciate that you coming for every week to these sessions, and I'll see you guys next week. Thank you for coming to meeting, and in the next lecture I'm going to finish Agile, and hopefully we'll do some case studies. Right, I'm gonna end this meeting now. Take care and have a lovely weekend. I will also upload this video as soon as the meeting is done, okay? So you can watch it on YouTube. Take care, guys. Have a lovely day. Bye.